Good morning. Good morning, everybody. We're going to grab our seats. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning. I have one logistical issue. If you drove a black Tesla to the event today and you have a ticket number 389, your vehicle's locked and blocking the valet line. So that's a challenge for us. So if you could help us out with that, black Tesla, ticket number 389. Thanks.
Yes, thank you.
All right. And with that, as if that's not a great opening, welcome. My name is Peter Blair. I'm the president and CEO of Duke & Lee, and I am really excited to welcome you to the April Agility Session. On behalf of our partners at the Foundation for the Carolinas, Share Charlotte, United Way, the CELC, and the Lee Institute, I want to invite you and welcome you to the Duke Mansion, a place that is central to the leadership of our great community. It's here, literally here in this very room, that so many important conversations of the day happened. And just like those conversations of our past, today's conversation will advance our community. I'm excited that you've decided to join us today, as this session is likely to be a really impactful one. It's set up to be an honest, courageous discussion on leadership through transition and change. Today's conversation touches at the heart of leadership itself. How do we find the strength to lead with clarity, courage, and compassion when the path ahead is uncertain? How do we find the strength to lead when we're searching to find it ourselves? How do we lead during times of adversity when we didn't expect it? The leaders before you today have all faced challenges and come out of them smarter, stronger, and with greater determination to achieve their missions. We're honored to have April Whitlock as our facilitator today. April is still facing a profound leadership moment following the unthinkable loss at LendingTree, the passing of their CEO, Doug Liebda. April will share a bit about the inner leader that we didn't know we have and that we didn't know we were, and how that strength helped to guide both an organization and a grieving team as they move forward. April is going to lead our discussion with several exceptional executives who bring their own stories of navigating transition, challenge, and renewal. You'll hear from each of them not so much about the operational details that they encountered, but more about the moments in which they are called to lead but may not have expected the challenge, and then how they led through those moments. Today's dialogue isn't simply about a single model of leadership. Rather, it's about real experiences from leaders who have faced moments of doubt and uncertainty and chosen to act with integrity, empathy, and courage. With that, please join me in welcoming April to begin our conversation.
Thank you. And if we have our panelists come up, please. And join me. I think we're all sitting here. Welcome, everyone. Before we get started, I do want to address a little bit what Peter said about the transition that we've all gone through at LendingTree. It is one of those situations that you plan for and you have. I am honored to report directly to our CHRO, Jill Olmstead. And so even though I'm not engaged in the day-to-day HR activities at LendingTree, my position falls on her senior leadership team, so I'm always kind of involved. One of the things that people don't realize is that we were going through some major succession planning over the year before Doug passed away. He was adamant that we start looking at all of his direct reports and that we have plans for each of them. You know, do we have an internal hire? Do we have someone? Can't stress enough that succession planning is the most important thing that you can do if you walk out, if you don't get anything out of this, is to not be offended when your board wants to do succession planning, but to do it and embrace it. Doug was the holdout. He was like, I'm not going anywhere. This is, you know, I started this company. I've been the CEO for 25 years. You don't have to worry about me. And we're like, well, you know, you are the chairman of the board and the CEO, so we should put an emergency plan in place. We won't worry about a long-term succession plan. That plan was put in place and signed off by our board 2 weeks before he passed away.
Wow.
So if that was not in place as a publicly held company, it would have been not only a tragedy that we were dealing with, but there would have been some serious legal and political and who knows ramifications that would have happened if we didn't already have a board-approved new chairman of the board and a new CEO. And because those plans were in place, we had identified people. Steve Aruzioni has been on our board for 15 years. That was a natural transition to take over the board. And our new CEO, Scott Puri, was our COO for the past year and a half. So if the only advice I can give you from a transition standpoint is to put your succession plans in place, not only for yourselves, but for your core key members of your team. The other piece of it is, I think when you look at LendingTree, we really jumped into the whole concept of like embracing our core principles when Doug passed away, because it was like, let's be true to our culture when we're giving our employees an opportunity to grieve. So we acted with urgency and creativity, which is one of our core principles, to make sure immediately everyone knew before the press went out. We gave our employees multiple ways to grieve, whether they wanted to write notes to the family, comment on a Slack channel about Doug and share their stories, or just have we brought in some grief counselors through our benefits team, and gave people the time and the space they needed. But the most important thing that we did was make sure we reminded everyone that this was, Doug's legacy, and that what he would want was for everybody to keep moving the ball forward and make the company as successful as possible. So that was the piece I think that was interesting when you're balancing grief, but continuing to say, how do I keep doing my job and do it the best way possible? So we had incredible leadership at every level on our management committee, and we were able to meet each employee across the country exactly, with what they needed to be able to grieve and to say it was okay to move on. So it's a challenge for sure. My boss, who's our CHRO, has been traveling around the country talking to other CHROs who are bringing her in, because most people don't have to manage this process. But please, please, please go back and start working on your succession planning, because this is the most important thing in transition. I would like each one of you to go down. We'll start with Minchayas, to introduce yourself, tell us what you do and where you do it, and give us a little 90 seconds about your organization.
Great. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm already mic'd. Right.
I wasn't appropriately dressed.
Thank you, April. Good morning, everyone. I'm Minchayas Zeri. I am the president and CEO of Communities in Schools. 6 years now in that role. It's hard to believe. Communities in Schools, we are in 40 Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. We actually place a full-time site coordinator in those schools, and their role is to meet the students where they are and to really work on removing the barriers that happen outside of the classroom that affect performance inside the classroom. So we provide support, everything from helping someone secure a roof over their heads, making sure that they have school supplies, uniforms, or even making sure that they have an opportunity to go to a college tour and really plan their future. Our goal is to make sure that a student can go as far as their dreams and their capabilities take them, regardless of their zip code.
I'm Emily Wheeler. I'm the CEO of Dress for Success Charlotte, and I've been in my role for about 2.5 years. Dress for Success Charlotte, we serve unemployed and underemployed women on their path to sustainable living wage work through a full spectrum of workforce development programs and services. Everything from job readiness and acquisition programming, job retention and advancement services. We have a financial education program, entrepreneurship. In 2025, we launched a job training program in partnership with Corning, and we've received some transformational funding to allow us to build out employment partnership pathways for women in our community. So it's been a really exciting couple of years. That said, we also have been going through an organizational change. We recently moved into a new Forever facility. Some of you may have been on site with us in February when we hosted a Share Charlotte, Share a Latte event. But when I started in my role, I stepped in after 18 years of my predecessor being in the executive director role, learned that we were launching a capital campaign and we were searching for a new Forever home as we were losing our lease. So I'm so excited to be part of this conversation today and promise that I also have a good therapist.
My name is Larissa Magnon. I'm the CEO at Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy. I've been in my role, it'll be a year in a couple of weeks, so yay. I made it. I was at Legal Aid of North Carolina right before then, which is our sister organization, so knew a lot of the people at CCLA when I went into the role, and I'm looking at Kelly as I say CCLA because I'm really not supposed to say that. It's not on brand, but it's very common in the community to say CCLA. And so we are a civil legal services organization. We're the oldest legal services organization in North Carolina, opening up in 1967. At that time, Legal Services of the Southern Piedmont, LISP, a lot of you all are probably familiar with that, was one organization with Legal Aid and CCLA, and then we split in 2002 strategically based on funding so that we could provide services to people who wouldn't have been able to get services with some of the federal funding that Legal Aid was getting. And so we were able to do a lot of immigration work because of that, help undocumented residents and people in our area. And so we technically, the name says Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy, but we actually have statewide projects. And so we operate statewide, have a lot of regional services as well, depending on the project, and offer holistic legal services, because when someone comes in, when you're doing poverty law, a lot of times they'll come in with one issue, right? It'll be like domestic violence or immigration or whatever, and they end up with tons of other issues that they don't realize that they actually have a need for. And so it's very helpful for us to have a lot of the departments that we have, because we can make referrals within the office and even to some of our community partners when their needs are pretty great. So. Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Terry White, and I am president and CEO of Charlotte Museum of History, everybody's favorite museum. So thanks in advance. We are the oldest history museum in the city of Charlotte, and we are the second oldest museum overall. Only the Mint Museum is older than we are. We take care of the oldest home in Mecklenburg County, the 1774 Rock House, as well as 4 other historic structures, including the Rosenwald Salome School. We are a 36,000 square foot museum, and I have been in my role, it'll be 4 years on 4th of July. Very easy to remember. I would say change and transition, Jesus. That is Charlotte Museum of History. When I started, we were on an operating budget of about $700,000. If my board approves my budget, for FY27 will be $1.6 million and growing. So we've more than doubled. And thank you. I've earned my gray hairs. I think the biggest thing for us is going from the sleepy colonial museum that the city had forgotten into the modern, nationally class institution that a city of our stature deserves. But even within that, expanding what it means to be a museum. So we recently became a Smithsonian affiliate. That's an honor given to less than 1% of museums. Thank you. And hot tip, you guys are getting public info. We will be expanding to a second site in Uptown within the next few years. Yes. So going from level 1 to level, whatever level won't give me a stroke, will all about today. So I'm excited for today.
Thank you guys so much. So let's jump in, Machias, or MTA, as I hear. Is that easier?
That's
Better?
easier, that's fine.
So I know, like many people in this room, you were specifically affected by a lot of the federal cuts and the lack of funding that started last year, and that led to some really challenging decisions to make in terms of reduction in force and other things. So can you walk us through your thinking and about some of the choices you had to make?
Yeah, thank you. So again, it's really good to be here, and it's really good to have this conversation. I know many of you as leaders in this space. I've been in human services for almost 30 years, and I'm trying to devour books that give you guidance that's specific to nonprofit and human services, and they really don't exist, right? And so for us to have this frank conversation about how do you navigate these challenges where you usually have a platform where you talk about all of the great things your organizations are doing. And so I think it's really important so that the lessons that we had to go through and endured and helped us become better as an organization, that we can share that with you all so you can learn vicariously through the work that we had to do at CIS. So when you are a leader, there are a couple of things that you cannot delegate, right? You cannot delegate being vigilant about your mission, right? Everyone knows your mission, but as the CEO or the leader of the organization, you have to be the watchdog for your mission. And the second thing that you really can't delegate is really having a long view of where the organization is going. So during this time period, I realized that I had to be vigilant about that. And so imagine you have to live in a time and space that everyone else in your organization is not living in. So things could look really great on the surface, and you're seeing 6 or 8 months down the road saying, oh my gosh, if the team only knew all of what was happening. Or things could be looking very, like you're at the end of the road and you're like, team, just hold on. So I'll be more specific. Last year was a banner year for us. We celebrated 40 years of service, 40 years in this community. The team calculated the numbers. That meant we served over 100,000 students. Right? Thank you. So when you have a milestone anniversary, you usually have a milestone event. We had a milestone event, and I mean, the team really did it up, right? There are so many people in the community who've been with us over this 40-year journey. You really wanted to give it the significance that it deserved. From the planning standpoint, it's always great when the event is fully funded. So our event, we went in there, everything paid for. This was January. I knew then that we had to make reductions in June. That's what it means to have to think about the long view. And so then you have to filter out the noise. Like, what will people think? We're having this big event, and then they're going to hear that we had to reduce staff. You're going, what are my donors going to think? What are my board members going to think, right? Because when I say that the CEO has to maintain the long view and be vigilant about the mission, your board is diverse. So you have some board members who are saying, you should make these changes yesterday. And you'll have others who are saying, do you have to do it, right? And so I will wrap up this part of the comments by saying that when you are faced with these decisions, you have to find a strength that you don't know that you have. You have to realize that you're leading from the perspective of the CEO, not as Menchayes or MTA. You're thinking about the survival of the organization. And to put it in dollars and cents context, you can't reduce office supplies or cut back on coffee or plastic cups when you lose $1.2 million, right? And how do you make that shift in the midst of everything else that's going on?
Just one more quick thing. Can you talk about having that sense of urgency and being able to act swiftly in that move?
Yeah, so the sense of urgency is really understanding the mission. And so we're there for the kids, right? And every decision that we make, every delay that we make, that is really, you can't even turn on a dime and raise an extra $1.2 million in the next year. And so the longer you delay in making the hard decisions in reducing staffing costs, the more you take away from the students that you are there to serve. And what you realize is you have to look at your organization through clear lenses. You take off the rose-colored lenses. I mean, as an organization, we were very fortunate that we always had a project manager, right? And what a decision like this means is you may not be able to have one if that means being in one less school. So you really have to make decisions that I don't want anyone to have to make, but when you look at the survival of your organization and being there for the long term, those decisions become very urgent.
Thank you. Larissa, I'm going to jump over to you. So you, as you told us, you're coming into 1 year, but you are the third executive director at the Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy in 3 years, maybe something like that. So let's talk a little bit about what you do from a leadership standpoint in that context when you're managing through transition that seems never ending.
Yeah, so for me, it became clear pretty early on that the thing I needed to focus on was trust and trust building. And that was both external and internal. I honestly thought it was going to be a little bit more challenging externally. I thought the reputational repair would be a little bit more challenging. Thankfully, Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy has a pretty good standing in the community, so that actually wasn't the hardest challenge. It was internal. And I didn't expect that to be the case. I mean, I knew that there were staff morale issues. I had heard that going in. But again, I was at a sister organization that was literally like a hop, skip, and a step away. And so it was hard for me to understand exactly how bad the staff morale was internally, how much trust had been eroded. And so it took quite some time. There was a lot of hostility going in that I didn't expect, because again, I knew these people. I had worked with these people. We all were in one building, years ago. And so it was kind of shocking, and it became clear to me again really early on that I just needed to focus on trust. And so the way I did that was the same way I'd done it at Legal Aid. I was a regional leader at Legal Aid, and we had gone through some tough transitions there, and it was like authenticity, transparency, right? Like, I am going to, at every step of the way, whether or not, if I have to make a hard decision, which I did, like a RIF early on, a reduction in force, if I have to do anything, if we're losing funding, if we're bringing on a new program at the same time that we're losing funding and, people don't understand, communicating every step of the way as articulately as I could and as detailed as I could, so that they knew early on exactly what was happening and why it was happening. And I think too, they over time, you work with people, they get to know you, and they see that you care about the work just like they do, right? I mean, I was a staff attorney, I was a supervising attorney, like I was in the courts doing the work with them at one point. They learned more about my story, they learned more about my upbringing, how I got into this work to begin with, and so I think they saw that I was committed to that, the same way they were, that I cared about the clients the same way they did, and I cared about the organization, and to your point, Minchai, it's like, looking at the long-term view, wanting to the organization to thrive, wanting it to be the leader for legal services that it once was, and that I know it could be again, right? And so allowing them into that space so that I could develop that trust. And that really requires trusting them too, trusting them to have the information. Because I think so many times leaders are like, oh, I don't want to give them this information. I don't know who they're going to share it with or how they're going to take it. But they're professionals, right? So trusting them and knowing that you can trust yourself to communicate in such a way that they will understand it. And of course, they're not going to always understand every nuance, but for the most part, they did understand. And I think we have definitely changed the staff morale within the organization, and people are excited about being there again, and we're hiring, and people are wanting to come work for us. They've heard in the community that we're a great place to work, so it's definitely turned around, and I think it really was just rebuilding that trust.
Thank you so much. Okay, Emily, so yes, yours change is a lot like what we're going through at LendingTree, where you're coming in following a larger-than-life who was current face of the organization, like you said, almost 20 years with Dress for Success, coming in with all the other changes that you have. How have you managed this pace of change and coming in and knowing the organization needed fresh eyes and a fresh perspective.
Sure. I was really fortunate to inherit an organization to step into an organization that had incredible consistency and stability. And so Curry, my predecessor, had done a really great job of making sure that the organization was providing services to women. You know, we are best known for a professional clothing program, and that was really a staple of our service in the community. And she was synonymous with Dress for Success Charlotte. So navigating that, kind of learning about our reputation and how connected her personhood, her leadership was with our organization was one piece. The other is that she stepped into a chief advancement officer role and was working parallel to me through that transition because of the capital campaign launch. And so part of that change and navigating with the staff was also constantly trying to remind our community, I am the executive director, you need to come to me. And sometimes that was staff, sometimes that was donors, supporters, volunteers. And so there was just that navigational nuance of having to learn how to set boundaries for myself, but also for our community around what that change looked like. And I think we were able to figure that out. It took some time, as it always does. But what I think was exciting and really difficult was exactly how you phrased it, April, that pace of change. I came into this stable organization. Many of the staff that were working with Dress for Success Charlotte had been there for 10 plus years and were doing incredible work. And the board brought me in because there was a recognition that we could be doing more, and it was time for us to think about what growth looks like. And so finding ways to both honor the history and the legacy that our organization has while challenging our team to think about where we can be going and growing and investing differently. I'll give a really easy example is everything that we did previously was on paper. Referral forms from partner organizations was on paper. When our volunteers signed in and signed out of working with us, it was on paper. All of our clients who showed up, we got information on paper, and all of those papers lived in my office. And so, even something that sounds as simple as converting our processes to electronic processes is not simple, because what technology do we have to facilitate that? Sure, staff have laptops, but if a volunteer is coming in, they're not used to scanning a QR code. So how do we got some iPads donated. How do we use that to streamline our process? But now how do we take all of the paper documents that we have and make that something that's digital? So things like that felt really cumbersome and overwhelming to our staff. And so having to be okay being in the weeds of it all and helping manage the process of those logistical changes. But I think bigger than that was the kind of philosophical who are we changes that come with a significant leadership transition, especially after a longtime leader. And I think that was much harder to navigate. Our staff cared deeply about the mission of the organization. I care deeply about the mission of the organization. But I think there was this inherent feeling that change meant that what had existed was not enough.
100% people think that.
And change is critique, when really it's change is trying to be responsive to the needs of our community. And we are doing enough, we have been doing enough, and how can we start to think about where we are going together that continues to serve the needs of the women that are coming through our doors. So I felt like the change that was overwhelming to our staff still felt slow to me. Sometimes it still does feel slow to me, but it at least has cracked open the opportunity for us to talk about it. So where have we come from? Like, what successes have we seen? Now, all of our processes are digital. It's so much better. It's so much faster. We don't have somebody having to move data from paper online one day a week. But beyond that, I think it's also empowered our staff to see I can make changes, I can lead changes, I can bring my ideas forward, and we will be open to those ideas whether or not we decide to move in that direction. And so it's shifted that culture from this is how we have done it to maybe I can rethink how I'm doing my role. And that's been really powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Terry, congratulations, by the way. That is just all, I'm so happy to hear of all the accomplishments. But let's talk about How are you doing this with the headwinds of the arts and culture funding conversations here in Charlotte, and how, as someone who sat on that board and don't know what happened the 3 years of my life that I did because nothing changed, but how are you managing through this?
Well, I'll say we are still the only museum that does not receive city funding,
Which
as
is
far
an
as the
issue.
regular arts money, and it's not small amounts that we're talking about. The other institutions get between 6 and 7 figures of general operating support, and those that are in city-owned facilities also don't have those operating expenses because those are covered by the city.
Wow.
So we are 100% independent, which is not fun when the bills are due. If you ever want to know how much a boiler costs, let me let you know. It's not fun. I would say, similar to what Larissa was saying, the first step was relationship rebuilding. So we had several leaders and board chairs that had really not just separated from the different communities of Charlotte, but in some cases really burned bridges between corporations, foundations, communities, other nonprofits. And my first week, there was a stack of 671 business cards. I will never forget that number. And I took that week and I just emailed everyone, hey, I'm the new president here. I'd love to get to know you and why your information is in my desk. Obviously, you knew us at some point. And everyone just was like, why are you wasting your time? But those emails are what started the relationships that are now helping to support the things we're doing. It has also given me data and facts and figures to bring to City Council to say, all right, you love what we're doing, it's time for the other shoe to drop and for you to pay for this. Because if you're enjoying the innovation, if you're enjoying the technology, augmented reality exhibit open now, just opened yesterday, someone has to pay the bills, because otherwise then I can just do what everyone else is doing and just sit around and save a whole lot of money by just being basic. I think another part of that has been myself and my staff have been very engaged with the museum industry beyond North Carolina. I think that arts in Charlotte in general has sort of isolated themselves from their respective industries, and what's working here is, oh, well, this is good enough, this is fine, I don't want to rock the boat. But when you see what museums and operas and ballets and symphonies and theaters, et cetera, are doing in all sorts of areas of the country, why not bring the best of that to the Queen City and demolish them all with excellence? You know, I'm competitive that way. And so being able to say, this isn't just my whimsical idea. No, here's an example of an organization similar in size in a similar size city, and here's how much it costs, but then here's the return on that. I'll say what has also helped with funders is showing that, you know, we're not buying golden toilets. We can tell you exactly where your money is going, and we make an effort to spend our money with businesses that reflect Charlotte. So having RFPs to make sure we're reaching minority-owned, women-owned, LGBTQ-owned, veteran-owned businesses, so that we're not just going to the same, oh yeah, you know, John has been doing this for 20 years, so he's just going to keep doing this service for us. One, it has saved us money. And two, it's really given us the opportunity to engage with communities in the thing that impacts all of us, money. Because whether or not you like history museums, everybody likes money. So being able to show the economic value, the economic impact of what we do, I think has been helpful. But please do let your city representatives know that you'd like us to get funding. It would save me a couple weeks of my life.
All right, I want to do one more question real quick before our break, and I'm going to ask you, Larissa. One of the things that you had to do pretty quickly was taking a new, huge program under your belt with the Council for Children's Rights. So can you talk about how that additional transition impacted the adjustments you were already trying to make, the things you were already doing when you were starting your role?
Yeah, so this reminds me of the story you were sharing about like having an event and knowing that a reduction in force is coming, right? So I'm like announcing a reduction in force, but I also know CFCR is closing, and I'm like, there's no way that I'm letting that program go, right? Because I know the impact that it's had on the community. Again, I worked in these spaces. I was a staff attorney. I was in court. I see the impact that it has on the clients that we care about. And I also know that if it goes away, it's much harder to bring back, right? And so I'm like, how can we do this in such a way that, you know, maybe we don't take on everybody from CFCR, which we obviously couldn't do, but like, how can we try to at least keep this substantive work happening so that the clients in the community, you know, who needs it, they're getting served. And so again, communicating that to staff, not everybody liked it, believe it or not. Like, I think some people were more upset about that than they were the reduction in force, right? Because it just, to them, seemed a little bit tone deaf, right? Like, how are you doing this at the same time that you're doing this? But, you know, when you were talking about, like, you know, program officers or different things that, you know, you could see reducing when you were, you know, doing the reduction in force. That's how it was for me. I was looking at the whole organization. I was really looking at the structure and how I was going to reorganize, because some of those things needed to be reorganized anyway, even if we hadn't lost funding, right? There were some positions that didn't make sense anymore. They did at one time. We're a new you know, a different organization now. We're, you know, innovating, we're changing, and, you know, like you said, change is important, right? You're trying to grow. It doesn't mean anything was bad before. It just means you're growing in a different direction now, and you're trying to take the organization to a new direction. So some of these reductions would have occurred anyway, even if it wasn't for funding, right? Because I was looking at the structure when I came in. And there was an opportunity to bring on this other organization and this work. And so, you know, communicating to our staff that care so much about the community, why this is important for the clients who would be benefited by having this program at our office, and being able to, again, think long-term and think, I want to be the leader for legal services in the state. I want to be the leader for legal services in our area. The only way I can do that is if I'm offering these services, right? And so I need to make sure that if something's about to go away, that I, you know, use that as an opportunity to see if it's a fit for our organization. And that also comes with money, right? Because, you know, people support that work. And so, you know, if we're trying to grow and we're trying to show that we are the substantive leader in this area, we need this practice area, and this is an opportunity to help them out and help ourselves out. You know, it's a win for everybody. And I will say, talking about news that's not public yet, that we're getting ready to post soon, is that we actually ended up acquiring their other program, the CAP program, as well. Very recent, yeah. So in the last couple of weeks, so that's their custody advocacy program. Which is great. So the program, the substantive program that we took over the summer was their ELP program, Education Law Program, and so now we're taking the second program that they had was their like high conflict custody cases, people in like sexual assault, domestic violence, you know, when there's child custody issues. We're going to be taking over that, so we're posting for that soon. So that's really exciting. They only have one other program, but you know, we'll see about that.
Well, I think we're turn this back over to Peter real quick, and we're going to have a break in the panel for some discussion, and then we'll be back with some more questions for these amazing leaders.
Thanks, April. Thanks, everybody. The lessons are profound and will continue. One of the things that we also know, though, is that as we think together as a group and build community together, that we come out stronger. And so we want to be very intentional today about taking what you've heard in this last half hour and now applying it at your tables and thinking about who are the colleagues sitting around today and what can you learn, right? And so really want you to take just a minute and think about a question together, and then we'll come back together and think a little bit more. So when you are faced with a leadership moment that challenges you, I want you to think about, are there any other outside resources that you lean on? Do you have consultants, mentors, folks that you reach out to, right? I think Emily said she's got a really good therapist, right? But I want you to think a little bit about that together and that's a big piece to sort of chew on, right? How do you find support within community and within the community of leading a nonprofit organization? So take just a minute, think about that at your table, talk to folks about when you hit that challenge, where do you turn?
teaching part is, I mean, with my role right now, it's probably more either just myself or my boss, because I'm a party of one, and having to make interesting decisions around, you have engagement survey data from what the employees want, and then you kind of have what your board's telling you to do, and I think you can't really, I can't lean on either one of them, and so you have to have your boss. And so we have about a minute and a half left, so if the panelists could come back up.
Here, I'll do a little wrap and then I'll hand to you. So I'm curious, as our panelists come back up, how about a brave soul out there that can tell us a little bit about the conversation that you had at your table and where you turn? Who's a brave soul out there who wants to tell us a little bit about what it felt like to have this conversation? Where do folks turn? All right. Ronnie, tell us a little bit about what your chatting was.
Ronnie Reddick, YBLA. So I want to first say that I felt hope amongst my table, because everyone kind of spoke with excitement. They spoke with collaboration. They spoke as if, they're on mission and do not feel any anxiety of not being able to find help. And I just wanted to share that the first thing I said was, which is to your question, like, who do you go to when you need it? I said, Peter. So I've been in these meetings and I've emailed him right afterwards with questions, and then they've invited me in to talk through ideas that I've had and share Charlotte. So those two resources have been invaluable to me. So please reach out to both of them, because they've been very welcoming and kind and wise.
Thanks, Ronnie. Very kind words. I'll slip you another 20 later.
Hi, I'm Kelly, representing this lovely table of women leaders. So we reach out to mentors and coaches, so either mentors in our own fields or folks that have come along the journey with us. I actually have a national coach that I actually pay for, and some of us have reached out to community and board members in crisis, and so using those services when you're transparent and when what was the other word you used? You used another word that was so good. It was something. It's okay. It's okay. So that, people are very generous when you are transparent and you ask for help. And then others, there are national organizations that sometimes we're all tied into with national peers, and we can talk about, what we're dealing with and what we're seeing in our own industry, but in Charlotte specifically, and bounce ideas off of other orgs that might be dealing with something similar in their own cities. And you're 40? Can I get $40? Is that what it's going to cost to get up the next?
Yeah, a nice word, maybe 100. I want to emphasize something you said, which is executive coaching, and I think it's something that I use myself. It's something that I give to others, and I'd really encourage you to think about it from a lens of research and development. Show me a company that doesn't invest in research and development that is still driving business forward, and there aren't examples of that, right? And so when you think about the R&D for a nonprofit organization, it is our own professional development, not just for ourselves, but for our entire teams. And so I've been involved in several organizations where you get a tight budget year and somebody on the finance committee says, well, just cut the Pro-D line, right? And I say, well, that's asinine. Like, honestly, like you're cutting off the only fuel that we have. And so for those who are executives in the room, I'd encourage you to think about yourselves in that regard and how you're investing in yourself. And a little bit of a spend in that can go a long way with the right coach. You got to find the right one, right? I've had one She lives in Chicago. She's been my coach for 15 years or something. So, you know, you find the right one, you continue that work. Ish, anything from the chat box? We've got about 24 or so folks online. So,
yeah. So we had a couple good comments come in from the chat. The first is from Natasha Witherspoon, sharing that she's been able to lean in on other development professionals who have built that trust with her, and insight from the community as well from those professionals is really beneficial. And then Catherine Mooring shared that she was lucky to have a coach in addition to wonderful mentors and colleagues. And Terry, your comment rang true around making sure you're connected outside of the Charlotte circle. Getting those additional perspectives is something that she leans on too. So appreciated that comment.
At the Lee Institute, one of the things we preach about is we believe the answers are in the room. We don't think we're the experts. We think the answers are in the room. And so I'd really encourage you to think about the folks who are sitting around you who are attending these sessions month in and month out, and find the folks. Find the folks that challenge your own way of thinking. Find the folks that when you say something, they don't just nod and smile. They give you something back. They give you something, as I like to say, something to chew on. With that, April, there's a whole lot more to chew on in this discussion. So take it away. You need the mic.
I'm pretty loud. So. All right, Machias, I'm going to come back to you for a second, and let's talk about what it's like when you're having to make really unpopular decisions, whether they're, obviously, over here on our table, we talked about the human element, unpopular with your staff, unpopular with your board, maybe unpopular with your donors. How do you approach that?
Yeah, no, I love that question. So how many of you are out here saying that one of the great things about being a leader is that you'll walk into the building and everyone hates you? Right? That's exactly what it feels like, right? When you have to make a decision, and I think part of what made it possible is that, you know, I brought my executive team on early on, and I brought the board on early on. I think early in my career, I thought that my job was to show the board how smart I was. I'd say, we had this big problem and the team came together and here's the resolution. I now realize that the board members are around the table because of their expertise, and you all are trying to steal Peter. He's around that table for us. And really just walking them through the journey together, helping them understand the thought processes. When it came down to actually reorging, you know, we did it without thinking about the people first in terms of who their names are, how long we thought about what did the organization need to look like, what were the guiding forces that we're leading up to making the decision, and then you add the people's names in afterwards, and you're like, oh my God, not this one. Oh, well, I mean, but you let the algorithm determine the process so that when you're in these conversations and when it is very unpopular, you can say, this is the methodology that we use. But I tell you, as a leader, you have to become comfortable with going long periods of time with people not understanding where you're coming from. They're really saying, what is this guy thinking? I mean, it's not just your own meetings too. I mean, I remember saying, boy, I don't want to go to that CLC meeting today. They know that we had these big layoffs, but it is part of the work. And what I will say is that there is a double standard. We talked about a little bit at the table in the for-profit realm. You know, CEOs are awarded and they're getting raises for making these. You read the papers like, oh, we let 6,000 people go. In the nonprofit space, you agonize over one. You beat yourself up as a leader saying, I failed my people because I had to make this decision. So it's not only being unpopular with your team, it's not only being unpopular with the larger community, it is, you know, you gotta be unpopular with yourself. It's a very tough and agonizing decision. But that's where thinking 6 months down the road comes into play, because in the midst of this, you're seeing, oh my gosh, we have this Harvard study that came out that proved CIS is a vital part of upward mobility, and you have these other things that are right on the horizon. It is just really casting that vision for others around you and casting that vision for yourself so that you can make it through those unpopular days. But there will be unpopular days, and if you can't handle them, then you really should reconsider if you really want to be in the top role, because there are unpopular days there.
That is very, yes. That's we had a sermon this morning. All right, Terry, let's talk a little bit. So going back to the money conversation and thinking about the transitions that you go through or the obstacles that you have, how transparent are you with your donors, and how do you craft communication to go out when you're raising money but going through a difficult time or a challenging time?
I'll say that one, we are platinum certified by Candid for our fiscal transparency. That was something that I reinstated when I started here, was that every year we are doing an audit. Yes, it's expensive. Yes, they're going to ask me inane questions about the most random purchase from 7 months ago that I don't remember. But what it has done is shown that on paper, my opinion, personality aside, we can show that the resources we are given, we are using towards the mission and purpose for why we exist. To sort of build off of what Menchaya said, is that if you think being an executive means you're going to get to be the celebrity big star and, oh, it'll be all about me. No, because oftentimes, you know, this is a moment of vulnerability, I guess. So I am a millennial. I'll be 43 on Monday.
All right.
Happy birthday.
Thanks, guys. I'll be at work. So when you talk about age, there are people that, well, how can this woman who's been working for almost 30 years know anything about work? Like, okay. Then just being transparent about my field, I'm a Black woman in charge of a museum that is not a Black History Museum. There are fewer than 10 of us in the nation who can say that. Black museums, hey, that's a different conversation. But then there's the conversation of, oh, and this was said to me, oh, you're going to try to turn this into a Black History Museum. Oh, you can't tell me about colonial America. Oh, how you're not, if you can't tell by my voice, I'm not Southern, so how can you tell me about Southern history? And what you learn is, I may not be the messenger for the funder or the donor. I don't really care who goes. I have, my COO is a 6-foot white dude from Alabama who went to Auburn, War Eagle. He's made me honorary. When I know that I need to go into a room with people who may not be receptive to me, just being honest, hey, guess what? You're going to this meeting. Here are your talking points. If there are situations where I need to be the face, even if I may not be the best person to have that conversation, I do that also. To me, it's not about I need to have the glory. I need to be the face I brought in. I just need the money to hit my bank account. So I think learning to decenter yourself and meet people with what they're interested in. So apparently the Hornets are doing well. Praise God, because I was like, geez, man. So if I do a program about basketball, I'm not going to go to someone who never watches basketball to, hey, are you interested in funding this? Because they're going to look at me like I'm dumb. Like, I don't even watch this. Why do you think I would support this? If someone is just, I hate all things 18th century. If it happened in the 1700s, I hope we forget about it. I won't come to them to support America 250. So knowing your audience, knowing the funders, I would ask maybe just like a question for you, if you could speak on the corporate end. Sometimes it's a little hard to know, hey, other than children and babies, everybody loves them. But more specifically, like when you talk about topics, what advice would you give us to tailor the messages when we have specific
Well, I think I'm not sure if I'm the best person to give that advice because I'm the funder that wants my nonprofits to be transparent completely to me and to be honest from the beginning. I think we've seen that too many times in nonprofits that are either struggling right now or may not even exist anymore because they refuse to acknowledge the pain that they were going through and they refuse to acknowledge the changes that need to be made. So from my perspective, specifically as a funder, I want, and I know that most of my peers feel the same way too, we don't want to see happy, happy, joy, joy all the time because then we don't believe it. It's impossible to believe that everything's great, especially in this environment. We want to know what the pain points are because if you are a committed funder in a committed relationship, which is what we want, it's a two-way street, then, you know, just like in business, using that analogy, things aren't great every single day. There are problems all the time that we have to work through. I would expect that's going on as well, especially in this environment. So I think honesty is always the best, and transparency is what we look for. So thanks for that. All right, Emily, let's talk a little bit more about the board and executive partnership. Especially, you were talking so much about the board brought you in for a reason, and that posed a challenge with the staff. But let's talk about how you're continuing to maintain that board relationship, and are you hitting bumps along the way? They're like, oh, no, we didn't bring you in for that kind of thing. So let's talk about that.
This is my first role as a nonprofit executive, and so the board knew that they were bringing in somebody who would need to learn in the role. But my background is also in programming, it's not in fundraising. And so I've learned a lot over the past 2.5 years. Turns out I can fundraise, but I share that because I think that was probably the biggest gap and area of naivety in terms of both myself stepping into this role, but also the board in their expectations of me. I think that the board had, again, a very stable organization that I was coming into, but the board had this expectation of, oh, well, you can be the executive director. You don't need to worry about the fundraising piece. And very, very quickly, I realized, those have to be one and the same in many spaces. Not in all spaces, but especially with a capital campaign, I have to be the face of the organization when we're asking for people to make significant investments in the future longevity of our organization, but also because this is, we're in a campaign of a size that we've never had before. And so that was challenging to bring to the board and say, I think that we had good intentions in how the model was built as I was stepping in, and we have to continue to learn and evolve from that. And so what is my role as it comes to capital campaign, and how can I better define that so that we're setting both myself and my predecessor up for success, but also so that we're thinking about the longevity and the health of the organization. And so there was a point that we were supposed to purchase our building, and I was looking at our financials and realized, I don't think we are ready to do this yet. And had been having conversations with the board, but really had to sit down and do some financial projections and have some really difficult conversations. And I went to a board meeting prepared to make a recommendation that I knew was going to be risky and unpopular. And I told my husband before I left the house, I hope I still have a job at the end of this. But if I don't, I know that I'm acting in the best interest of the organization and with integrity for myself. And to me, those are my two non-negotiables. And what I found was that the board very much valued the risk that I was willing to take and the difficult conversation that I understood we had to have. And it opened the door to what now has been an even better option that wasn't on the table before. And so it led us down a path that was really successful, but we didn't know that at the time. And I felt incredibly vulnerable as a new leader, a new ED in this role, coming in after somebody who had been there for so long, because I didn't want to be the reason that our organization failed. But I also didn't want to be seen as a failure. And I had to let that go. I had to realize that the failure of our organization long term was more important than whether or not I was perceived as failing in this role. And luckily, it didn't end up being that choice, but I think that also earned me a lot of respect with our board and recognition that I will bring hard things and I will challenge the direction we're going when those needs arise. And so it ultimately ended up being a very good thing. At the time, it was a really challenging and stressful situation.
Let's see. I'll throw this out to anyone who wants to jump in, but let's talk about communication in leadership. We hear the word, I've heard the word transparency, I've heard the word taking risk and hard conversations, but talk to me a little bit about how you approach communication, or what are the most important things about your communication as a leader during challenging times and hard transitions. Whoever wants to jump in.
I mean, I started talking about transparency, so I'll continue, but like I'm also very direct, and so I just share what needs to be shared, right? And so I try to be mindful. I'm probably not always great at it. Kelly can tell me. I try to be mindful of how it's coming off, but I'd rather be direct and honest and transparent than you like wonder what's happening or have to like search for some answer and have uncertainty. So that's been my approach, and I think again, sometimes I have to go back if it came off offensively and say like, hey, I'm sorry, that wasn't my intention. But I do think people overall appreciate that more than like having to search for answers or having uncertainty and not knowing where they stand.
That's true. Anyone else want to chime in?
We have a really small staff, so we have 6 professional full-time staff. We have some contract roles. We're growing to 10 staff positions this year, but we have, yes, and I think the collaborative piece, when I stepped into the organization, everyone had their very clearly defined role, which really was silos. Like there was no information flowing across, it was all going up. And I very quickly realized I cannot be the gatekeeper of all of the information. I don't want to be responsible for telling you that this person is doing this, because my short-term memory is terrible and it's gonna fall through the cracks because of all the other things that I'm navigating. And so trying to break down those silos and foster collaboration, I think has been really critical when it comes to communication with our staff, because we're small, so everybody has to do a little bit of everything. But we've also been able to build standard operating procedures so that roles are still clearly defined, but that we also then have clarity around who is supporting, who can be backup in a situation, and it's not that one thing lives with one person all the time. But now as our staff grows, I think we are better set up for success because we have this more collaborative, communicative culture, and I've been able to establish a leadership team that we didn't have before, so that I'm also able to share decision-making more collaboratively when appropriate. And so I think that's been a really meaningful communication tool for our staff, is reestablishing a collaborative environment to help with the health of the overall organization.
I'll jump in real fast. When you're dealing with a reduction in force, there are some areas where you can't be as transparent as you want to be. And what I've found is that the whole process around reduction in force really comes out of a corporate culture, which is less warm than the nonprofit culture at times. And so I immediately worked with legal counsel, and legal counsel says, this is the way you have to do it. And I'm like, that doesn't match our culture. And then you find yourself in a predicament where, so now do I go against legal counsel, or do I? And of course you follow legal counsel, but it'll be someone else sitting up here, right? But what happens is you then find yourself going through talking to someone who's worked for your organization 20, 30 years, and you're reading a script.
Yeah.
Right? It really is hard. So what happens is you build regular communication cadences before and after, and you have those really hard conversations afterwards, and you just continue to learn and tweak. But bringing the RIF process to the nonprofit space, it doesn't match our culture oftentimes.
All right, let's do a lightning round here. Terry, I'm gonna start with you. We're gonna hit everybody. I mean, I'm exhausted sitting here, listening to you guys and what you've gone through, and we know that not only is the work you do every day exhausting, but change and the times that we're living in right now and the transition all you have gone through. So what do you do for yourself so that you're able to keep you said nap?
A nap.
All right. I love a good nap.
Well, no, I am the queen of naps. If I can fall asleep anywhere. But we're professional. I am blessed in that I have a friend group that none of us work in the same industry. So if I have to just have I can't code switch right now, y'all. We gotta we gotta take this back to college days. Let me tell you what these people said to me. I can have that venting moment, and because they aren't directly in my field and vice versa, they can offer perspectives and ideas that, one, calm me down because they're people I trust, they're my friends, but two, it really helps inform the work so that I can move forward in a way that's beneficial for my organization.
That's awesome. Larissa?
And nap.
For me, it's two things, really my relationships outside of work. So I'm raising 3 children, and they are like the highlight of my life, right? They're at really fun ages. I do a lot of fun things with them, have really fun conversations, especially my teenager. I mean, the conversations we're having now are just like, wow, how did we get here? But that really helps like take me away from work, right? And just focus on them. I really enjoy that, and just my family and my friends. But the other thing is that I love to be in nature. So I love to go for walks. I love to sit on my porch. I like to be on my deck. And that brings me, stargazing at night, like all of that brings me a certain level of peace that I can't even like articulate really and describe. It's just this incredible peace just from being in nature and being outside. So those are really the two things I would say, my relationships and in nature.
Great. What about you, Emily?
I think it took me 2 years to realize that I need to have boundaries for myself, and I think part of that was establishing confidence in my role. But one boundary that I have gotten much better at is when I am with my kids and my family, that they get my attention. And so I'm better at turning my phone on airplane mode or do not disturb, putting it away, and just enjoying time, because my kids, they also are so fun. And so, but when my mind is in that other place, it's hard to enjoy that. And so being able to better prioritize my time is great. And I consume so many books. That is my escapism. That is my ability to not be in my head. And so audiobooks in the car, that's my time. I read before bed every day. So if folks have good book recommendations, I'm always looking for the next.
All right, close this out, MTA.
Yeah, great question. My team who's here know that I have to get outdoors. I have to work out. I actually talk with my board either before work, during lunch, or after work. If I don't get my workout on, I turn into someone else, and I don't want to be that guy. And secondly, I have a group of friends outside as well. I call them my shadow consultancy group, and they really give you a perspective and they keep you honest.
Well, thank you guys so much for spending some time this morning with us and sharing about your transition journey. We are going to have another discussion here with the tables, but if you'd all please give our panel a round of applause.
I can't thank our panelists and April, our facilitator, enough for your transparency, for your vulnerability, for your willingness to let us in to the moments that really do challenge us the most. And yeah, you got to find those things. You got to find the boundaries. You got to set them yourself, and you got to figure out, what is that style. I love Menchias. I loved your comment on, you have to do things and follow legal counsel, and it doesn't fit the culture of the organization. So what am I going to do pre? What am I going to do post? Right, to sort of find that path that feels right for you as a leader. And I love the transparency that y'all brought about, like, this is hard work, right? And being a change agent is not easy. When someone called me that the first time, I thought it was a swear word, honestly. I was like, what does that mean? And they were like, well, you're willing to say the things that are hard. You're willing to make the tough decisions, right? You're willing to come in and say, I'm going to take a risk that, might ruffle some feathers, might make me unpopular. And so, maybe we'll do something someday on how to interview for these roles, right? Because that's a whole, honestly, it's a whole art. But one of the things that I say to every single organization that I interview with is, don't hire me if you want me to just continue to do what you've always done. If that's what you want, I'm the wrong guy, because I know enough about who I am and how I see things and what I bring to the table to know I can't be that person, right? And sometimes that's what an organization needs, right? And sometimes, like Emily, what you stepped into, right? Like, you're coming in and you're like, you want change, right? You have to remind the board, like, 6 months later, like, you did want that, right? We agreed to that. You told me that's what you wanted. Change is not easy, right? Change is really, really hard. So with that in mind, take a moment at your tables and think about the duality of this, right? What aspects of leading a nonprofit organization do you find most challenging? And when you think about your leadership skills, what areas do you feel most confident? One of the tools that we work with a lot here at the Lee Institute is Gallup's Strength Finder. And you name it, I've taken whatever quiz is out there, right? I'm a EPLFMA, I'm a green, I'm a blue, I'm a whatever, right? But this one, it really focuses on what I just asked you and what I want you to think about, right? Where are you most challenged, and where do you find strength? And where do you know you're strongest? And as you assemble those teams around you, or if you're a member of a team, right, knowing where you fit in and knowing what you're really bad at, right, or not, what's not a strength, I guess is what my team would tell me to say, is really important, right? Like, I'm a terrible project manager. I really am. I can't do that type of work. But I can vision, I can dream, I can sell it, right? So knowing that, so take a moment at your table. What's most challenging about your work, this work, and where do you really succeed? And we'll come back together in about 10 minutes. All right, as we come back together, I hate to cut off the conversations at the tables because this is exactly what we want and what we ask you to do. But who's a brave soul that'll start us out and say, here's either an area where I'm really good at, recognizing that the whole room's going to take a note and say, go talk to so-and-so about that, or who's got an area of vulnerability that they're willing to say, I'm not really good at that. What came about from these discussions? Rich discussions. All of a sudden, everybody's an introvert. Yeah? What did you talk about? Where are you good at? What are you good at? What are you challenged by? What came out from these conversations?
I will be honest. One thing I shared that I'm really bad at is caring enough about what other people think and feel. Like, I tend to see the vision and know where I want to go, and I just want people to follow me along and trust me in the vision. And I've had to make myself, as we've discussed, do a much better job of getting consensus of my team, because I know at the end it will get us where I want to go faster. But that's been a challenge for me.
I have that same challenge. I mentioned Strength Finder, right? There's 34 different strengths you can have, and they rank them 1 to 34. My 34 is empathy. My 33 is harmony. So, yeah, your number one's harmony. Yeah, so right, my challenge is build a team that has that. Yeah, Angie.
Hello. I am really good at building relationships, meeting people. People seem to convene around an idea that I have and having vision, and that's a wonderful thing, especially with where we are right now at our organization. But I struggle with the follow-up from that. The project management, low. The following up on all the things. I get all the ideas. I got all the people in the room. Who's sending the damn email after that? Who took notes? who's going to catch this and then run and execute on it. So I have learned that I have to have a team around me that can do that part of the work, or things will just fall flat. We just have sessions where we have great ideas and nothing else happens after that. So
I want to thank you all for your vulnerability today, for having the conversation, for being a part of it, for dedicating a couple hours of your day to think with us about leadership. Leadership's hard. Leadership can be lonely if you let it be. It's definitely exhausting. Find those moments where you can have a bit of respite. And I hope you got something out of it today. I think it was a powerful conversation. Really appreciate everybody who participated today. With that, I turn it over to my colleague, Tracy Russ.
Thank you, Peter. And good morning, everyone. I promise this will be quick, and then we'll be on our way. I want to add our thanks from the Foundation for the Carolinas and the Robinson Center for Civic Leadership for all of your time together, including those online. And again, I'll echo the vulnerability and your candidness and your sharing of challenges in a very open way. That's how this works, right? So I'll pick up on the thread of announcing things, Terry, in the room, and talk a little bit about leading on opportunity and specifically the Opportunity Compass. And as you may know, leading on opportunity as a separate or intact structure, organization will discontinue in that form at the end of June. Does that mean that economic mobility is no longer sort of on the agenda? No, it does not mean that. Whether we say it is or isn't, or whether anyone says it is or isn't a top priority, it of course is, and important to all of us. So I want you to know, A, that economic mobility remains at the top of the agenda for Foundation for the Carolinas, partners and stakeholders in the community. As you all are very aware, it's a difficult fundraising environment, and the resources simply were not there for it to continue in its present form. And rather than trying to sort of halfway fly an airplane with no fuel in it, we chose to take action and seek different solutions to be agile. And what it looks like, and this is in the realm of announcing things, it's really not an announcement, but I'm going to tell you what we're thinking. We are creating a significant strategic partnership with UNC Charlotte and with the Data Trust. And our goal is to include leading on opportunity, economic mobility, and specifically the Opportunity Compass in that stream of work with them. So we are hopeful that that will work. What will help us to do so are some upcoming conversations that we want to have with you and others in the community around the utility of the compass itself. Was it useful to you in a practical, pragmatic way? If so, how? And we want to know these things so that we can adjust it, tune it, revise it as may be needed so that it is maximally useful to you for everyone. And if it isn't, then we'll pivot and we'll find something that is. So we're going to have some conversations that should be open, and we will appreciate your feedback in advance, but we wanted you to know that economic mobility is not going anywhere in terms of an agenda item or top of mind for anyone. The way we go about making that happen and increasing economic mobility will change, just as we are all changing and having to find ways to adapt. So we'll continue to do so with your help. And I want to echo the invitation to the Community Impact Summit on May 14th. Can't wait to see everybody there, and we're going to keep on working together, and more to come on the 14th of May.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you so much. I'm here to close this out and to celebrate. This is our 10th Agility Together session. So awesome to us. I think when I want to echo Terry's comment about Charlotte excellence. What's happening here, what we're learning from each other and the knowledge in the room that we're sharing is not happening in other cities. Charlotte is unique, Charlotte is special, and we all know that. And I applaud all of you for being part of that. I think when we started this journey, we thought, okay, we're going to do 3. and that will be the journey. But you guys kept showing up and saying, well, no, we need more. We need to learn more. We need to meet more. We need to convene. We need to be in community with each other. So we, as the planning the planning committee that meets every Tuesday to pour over your responses and read thoroughly everything you're telling us, so we can plan thoughtfully on the topics that we bring forward to you. So as that continues, we're holding focus groups this Friday. A lot of you were invited. If you've been attending, you got invited. Put the feedback in your survey that you'll receive after this, but this is how we move forward together, is we listen to you, we learn, and we plan accordingly to respond to what you need to know. So with that, please join us for the May 14th session. That will be our May agility session, if you will, but a much bigger stage at Carolina Theater. And then on June 17th, we're going to be talking about mental health and building resilience for nonprofit leaders with our partners, Novant Health. So that will be at the Novant Health space. So more to come on that. But thank you for joining us. Thank you to Peter and the Duke Mansion team. Well, such a beautiful space on this April day. And thank you to our panelists. And have a great Wednesday.